Hello, and we roll to the end of another week, a very eventful week, locally and abroad. We had a long holiday. Were you sober by any chance for the long weekend?
Is that a rhetorical question?
I saw photos. But yeah, a lot has happened, and as usual, we meet at the usual watering hole, and we try and sort it all out and try and make sense of it and see if we can make the world a better place. As you know, don't take us too seriously because we have no idea what we're talking about. What are we drinking, gents? Before we do, what are those pink socks?
Rufaro, what do you think? Is this pink? Does it in any way look like pink?
It does actually. I don't think it's red like you were claiming earlier.
Oh, okay. It's red. It's not pink.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, yeah, you're in red socks today.
Yes.
But you know, I'm very impressed with this current streak of yours with navy and white. It suits you. It's very dignified.
Oh, it's winter.
These ice cream colors. It's not winter anymore. It's like 26, 27 degrees outside.
It's still winter, I think.
According to you.
Yeah. Wow. No, according to the seasons, actually. According to science.
The Msasa trees are now turning red. And this is
according
winter.
to science, it's still winter. But spring is
upon us.
It
beckons.
Yeah, it beckons, and you'll be sure to see a more brighter me in spring. I'm looking forward to spring.
Touch wood.
But I must say, I approve of this look.
Okay, thank you very much, George.
So what are you drinking?
Did you want to know?
No, not really. It's just, we just have to check that box before
we
move
have
on to the
elections.
interesting
We have
things.
elections in Kenya, and so I'm having had.
By the time they're watching it, they know who won.
Absolutely. So it's a medium roast Arabica Kenya coffee, and it's a latte, so it's quite nice. I made it myself.
You made it yourself. You pressed a button, you mean? And I didn't hear you giving credit to who brought you the coffee.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you very much, George.
Oh, you're welcome. And this guy always complains that nobody ever donates drinks to him.
And we shouldn't really, but yeah, every once in a while, there's someone who's very, you have a benefactor. You know.
Thank you very much, George. Appreciate it.
And what are we having?
So today, as always, we're having the more interesting drink. And, Jameson is a famous Irish whiskey brand. They're known for being cheap and cheerful. A few years ago, they introduced this particular version, the Black Barrel, that comes with a cork. So it's a bit pricier than the normal one.
Because of the cork?
No, not. Well, it comes with a cork for a reason. And it's.
I have a question. Do you ever get tired of drinking?
No.
No. How is that possible?
I don't know. It's just. Is there such a thing as too much alcohol?
Yes.
There's.
And you don't think you're there yet?
No, not yet. But
Okay.
I must say, from time to time, I do wonder. But no, I think we're still on the safe side. What do you think?
Like I always say, it all smells the same.
So
Why do you bother?
I don't know. I'm hoping that one day it'll be different.
yeah, well, perhaps one day you'll have an epiphany, and you will join the right side of history.
Well, look, he's on a positive trend. He stopped wearing ice cream colors. He's wearing normal clothes.
No, it's because of the seasons, George. We dress according to the seasons. Guess you didn't know.
Also, okay. So navy is a winter thing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Dark
Anyway,
colors.
what are we drinking?
It's the Black Barrel, and it's called Black Barrel because it's matured in charred oak. So what they do before they put the whiskey in it to mature it is they torch it.
The toasted barrel.
They toast the inside of the barrel until it's charred. So they're torched and charred, and they add a different character profile to the whiskey as it matures and interacts with the wood. And the charred wood basically gives it a spiciness and some vanilla. So this is one of the better Jamesons.
I'm not a great fan of Irish whiskey. But you picked it.
Your thoughts?
It's better than the regular Jameson.
I would hope so.
but Scotch any day. And okay, we can have a whole show about the difference and how they make it. And
Why are you looking at me?
because we'd have to educate you.
Because it's going completely over.
No, but do you think that I'll be interested to know the difference between an Irish and a Scottish?
Scotch.
Thank you. Anyway, so tell me, are we having Irish whiskey because of the rate?
Why would
is this where we've come to?
I don't get the association.
Perhaps you had taken a position on the rate running to 800, 1,000, and now that it's come back to 700, 750, well, so I'm told, wink wink, perhaps you're out of the money.
No, not at all.
To Masese whiskey,
well, this is, I wouldn't put it in the league of Masese, but it is quite interesting that the rate has come back. Do you think the gold coins have anything to do with it?
Absolutely not. I mean, we know that they've released only 2,000, or even if you say 3,000 gold coins, that's still less than $4 million US. That would not even move the needle. But what has happened is...
Well, 3 times 1.8 is 5.4.
Yeah, but they're selling them at half the price.
Half to who?
Anybody buying them with some dollars. Yeah,
but it's half the price. So
it's a coincidence?
No, it's
that
not
the rate has pulled back, and
it's not a coincidence.
And is it half price if the official rate is now closer to 500 and the parallel rate is?
When they released the gold coins,
it's about 750.
Yeah, when they released the gold coins, it was half the price. But I think the most significant thing you need to be careful about is that the total money supply, M3 in Zimbabwe, is now over $1 trillion. So it was $1 trillion in May. I would assume that by now it's somewhere closer to 1.5 trillion.
That sounds like speculation. Let's work with the official numbers.
No, we don't have. They haven't given us.
Yeah, so let's not speculate.
You always tell us to stick to the data.
Yeah, and I'm saying the
Mr.
data,
Careful.
the data in May was $1 trillion.
Okay.
Let's
Money supply.
Let's take that number.
All right, but you're talking about things that happened in July.
But anyway, we know in May it was.
It was north of $1 trillion.
Yes.
It's $1 trillion. So anything that the gold coins have done would not have a marked impact on the $1 trillion that's actually out there in terms of money supply. But of that $1 trillion, it's fair enough to say that half of it is real, well, not real, but it's US dollars.
It's Nostro.
It's Nostro. Yeah.
RTGS Nostro.
RTG. Well, it's Nostro. Let's call it Nostro. So what we're talking about in terms of Zim dollars is $500 billion in our economy as of May. So it's not the gold coins. What has happened is we know for certain that the government or treasury has withdrawn making invoice payments. These are contractors that have supplied, whether it's road construction or some sort of product to government. These haven't been paid, and some of them have gone as far as I think 3 months or so. And this is really the reason, because really, when you look at our money supply has been growing purely because of treasury payments. Every time the treasury makes a payment,
Tuli is right. Was it Tuli or JPM? One of them is right.
Well, eventually, both of them have actually commented on this, and now the president has taken it upon himself to stop all payments and to go through each and every payment. Reminds me of what Obama tried to do at some point in time. He said he will go through a line item of every payment that Treasury makes. That's what Obama said in an election. Suffice to say, it never happened. But our president has said that he's going through all the payments and to ensure that whenever they make a payment, it's actually for goods that have been supplied and have been supplied at the correct pricing.
Wait. We've got 400,000 people in the civil service. Thumbs up. 5% of them work in the Ministry of Finance. There's 20,000 people in the Ministry of Finance. Say even 5,000 people in the Ministry of Finance. And the president needs to check the payments.
We said we're going to stick with the facts, right? This is what we've been told. Otherwise, everything else is just speculation. And you said I shouldn't speculate.
No, you shouldn't speculate.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
Look,
so that's exactly what has happened. That contractors haven't been paid, and this is primarily the reason why the rate doesn't. It has
The rate
not
is not
moved.
moving.
Has not
So the
moved
government
that
is, the government is not making big payments, and then
No, it hasn't.
and when the government stops making big payments, we see the rate not moving and maybe coming off a little bit.
Yeah. CZI came out. I think it was earlier this year or late last year when they said something like we import 90% of our. We import 90% of our inputs are imported.
Yes, they said the
Right.
local value add is 7%.
Exactly. So if you think about it, whatever we our contractors were supplying government, a lot of them rely on imports. So
well, if what you're
that's where
saying
the demand
is correct,
essentially
that's not a sustainable solution in terms of containing the rate, and it'll
No, why is that not sustainable? They can just
not pay contractors.
stop doing these mega projects.
But they haven't announced that they've stopped doing mega projects. They've announced that they're going to be very careful about how they make payments to
But
them.
isn't that the logical next step? When inflation slows down because you're not making payments, isn't the logical next step?
inflation hasn't slowed down, and we need to be very careful.
Sorry.
The rate.
Well, the rate is a very good proxy for inflation. So it's actually, I think it's a
It's a
leading
forward indicator.
Yeah, it's a forward indicator. So I think, but I wouldn't want
you're
to get into that.
speculating.
No, I'm not speculating.
You are, because, and this is what consumers have been complaining about, that although the rate has somewhat slowed or come down, the prices haven't.
Were you listening to our show last week about lagging and leading indicators?
Yes.
And we agreed last week that the rate is
So there's this thing called prices are sticky downwards.
yes, we didn't say they'll come down.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying let's not talk about inflation. Let's talk about the rate.
You're in a bad mood today.
No.
No, the two are related, we could end up in a rabbit hole about the relationship between inflation and rate. But I think I want to posit that perhaps there's another explanation for what we're seeing, which is just the Zim dollar is in a bear market rally. I don't know whether you're familiar with
what does that mean?
with what a bear market is. So I'll give you an example in the context of international equity markets. So
Okay, so first of all, just explain, because the Zim dollar is strengthening,
yes, so
and you're calling it a bear.
So it's a bear market rally. So
I need to understand that.
So basically, for the last 3 years or so, the trajectory of the Zim dollar has been bearish, meaning it's been devaluing, it's been losing value. That's right. So that's a bearish trend. So the long-term trend for the Zim dollar is bearish, right? So what a bear market rally simply is that on its in the long-term trend, right, there can be a correction where maybe it gets oversold, right? It devalues too quickly for whatever reason, and then it corrects. But it doesn't mean the long-term trajectory has changed. It's just
so basically you're saying when the rate went to 1,000, it overshot.
or when it went to 800 or 850, it might have overshot. Yes, and so
It's correcting itself.
so it's a bear market rally.
The trend will continue.
Yeah,
Okay.
So perhaps
I think I can accept it.
I mean, I think obviously 30, 60 days from now, we will have much more data, and if there is a specific issue of non-payments or other developments that have driven it, we'll be able to analyze with the benefit of actual data. But at this stage, I don't think we have any really good compelling data apart from certain statements, which we should take with a pinch of
every
salt.
time the rate moves, we know why the rate moves.
Well, and in fairness to Tinashe, we heard this from the governor himself. The governor came out and said, hey, don't blame me for the rate moving. It happens every time those guys pay their contractors, and they're overpaying their contractors. And then Mutuli came out and said, yes, sometimes we overpay them because we don't know how much things are worth and we get overcharged. And then the rate moves. So now we're creating a special unit in the Ministry of Finance to check that things are worth what we're told they're worth.
It's just
They could have used Google, but anyway, he truly says that this is what they're doing. So we
Is this parallel to the FIU? Because I would assume that the FIU, that's exactly what the FIUs do.
No, that's not the FIU's job. The FIU is
it
anti-money
is.
laundering and combating financial.
No. Anytime you dabble in the black market or in the borrow market,
but
they flag.
No, but
that's their job.
But the starting point is truly saying, like a kilometer of road is supposed to cost X, and we're paying twice or 1.5 times X, and we didn't know. So now we're creating a new unit to say how much a kilometer of road should cost and how much tissue paper should cost when we buy it for government ministries. As I say, they could have gone to Google or they could have gone to OK and check prices.
I think there's a point that I would like to highlight, and this was actually raised by the Auditor General, and I think we spent a bit of time talking about it I think last year when we discussed the Auditor General's report, and we highlighted it again when we talked about the continuation bill, that what tends to happen is that the line ministries themselves are the ones that overspend. And then Treasury eventually gets a reconciliation that actually this was approved, 100 liters was approved, but actually the ministry spent 200 liters.
It's not shit. I hate having to hark back to my accounting days. But in a normal company, this is exactly what happens, right? There's a guy in procurement, there's an engineer, or a guy in the factory who goes around and finds raw materials, right? So let's say we make maize meal in this company. There's a guy who goes and finds maize and comes back and tells the finance guys that, oh, by the way, I found a guy with 200 tons of maize. I've received it. You guys need to pay him so much. And that's what you're saying the ministries do, right? But in a normal company, the guys in finance will be like, but Blaz, you bought this maize for this price. Look at this advert in the newspaper for maize at that price. No, we're not paying that. Can you call your guy back and have this discussion?
So the equivalent is, you know what tends to happen in companies when it's the CEO's office?
Yeah. But you're saying it's the ministry, not the CEO's office.
It's the presidential office. You know that OPC is actually much bigger than the ministries themselves. And there's certain strategic, let's say command agriculture, right? Command agriculture is way above Treasury, right? It sits in the Ministry of Agriculture, but it's way above
So what's the special
Treasury.
unit going to do there?
Well, I thought that's why we're laughing, right?
yeah, no, it's hilarious. I mean,
That's a very good example. So there is a clerk in the Ministry of Finance who's got to pay for fertilizer for command. But last week he bought fertilizer for his farm, and he looks at the invoice. Surely he says, "Chef, I'll show you where I bought fertilizer last week. It wasn't this price."
Yeah. And even more disconcerting now is we know from the census that we only have 3.8 million households. But when we are doing command and we're doing Fumbudza and all these programs, we target 3 million households. That's like 80% of our households. So the Ministry of Finance...
So there's nobody living in town, basically. So everybody is living...
in the rurals, it turns out.
and farming.
And farming. So you can see the costs are extremely high, but the output, there's absolutely nothing happening with the output. And that's why we have hyperinflation, is because we've paid out all these invoices for 3 million households, but there's no production.
The money is not chasing anything. The money is just floating.
It's just floating. And we don't even know where that money actually ends up.
So what do we do?
Well,
We create a special unit.
yeah, look, I think that's just a sideshow, distraction. You know, I don't for a moment believe that it's because people in Treasury can't figure out what fair value for things are, and they need to, you know, they've had an epiphany that actually, let's set up the special unit. It's hilarious to me that that could be the problem. I think it's just a way to, you know, come up with a narrative that, it's not the printing press. Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, it's printing. That's the problem.
So what would you do if the Ministry of Agriculture comes to you as Treasury and says that we want winter crop, we're looking at 75,000 hectares? Would you believe them or not?
Of course not.
I think that's part of our problem. Because the bigger the number, the bigger the politicians get excited. But if you really think about it, you're a farmer, or you somewhat dabble. If you think about it, 75,000 hectares.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah. Without electricity supplies, or regular electricity supplies, and you've turned off some of the farmers during the winter crop.
Well, they weren't paying.
So I think if you're a Treasury, really a lot of these numbers, I think, it's never happened, and it's not going to happen. And let's not lie to.
I think the sad reality of where our economy is today is that 60-70% plus of the activity is informal, it's in hard currency, and going forward, what is disclosed in the national accounts and by Treasury is going to matter less and less and less, because that
they can't see it.
the formal economy is shrinking because it's harder and harder to do business. There's lots and lots of regulation, and these regulations are constantly changing. And if you're in that space, tomorrow you could wake up and be labeled a villain or bogeyman, and so the activity is moving to the informal sector, and that's where it is. And that's where we're going, where we'll wake up one day in 6-18 months and nobody will be interested in what's happening with Zim dollars.
I think that government is still the biggest. So if you look at Zimra, if you think about it, Zimra collects about $3 billion. It's going to be a bad year. Let's say they collect $2 billion. That's still a significant consumption.
It will never be that bad.
Sorry?
It will never be.
And it will never be that bad. Yeah. That's still very, very significant. So government expenditure is still quite significant in our economy. And you can't wish it away. And that's why the minute you turn it off, that's why the economy sort of contracts. Because it's a significant number.
So wait. So if you follow your argument, you've been arguing week after week here that the government must stop making these huge expenditures. But if you follow your argument today, you're saying, wait, they mustn't be so drastic about
No. I'm actually agreeing. He's saying we can ignore government expenditure, and I'm
not saying we can ignore. I'm talking about the Zim dollar,
cannot.
and you're conflating it with government expenditure. They're not the same thing.
Government only spends in Zim dollar.
No. They also they collect a lot of money in US dollars, and they spend a lot of US dollars.
Loco nostro, but they spend a lot of their money in Zim dollars.
Yes, and that spending power is going to, as the economy shifts more and more to US dollars, their receipts are going to also be more and more US dollar denominated, and their spending is also going to be more and more US dollar denominated.
Shall we go for a break?
Sure.
So we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Hangi. Apana kana chikafu.
Hey, indlala hey. Bazasibulala ngendlala wanhlaba.
Angikho okubikile ikho.
Asabe.
Imugulibike makabeji.
Ngifuna usibulalisa ngendlala
Kwethe sekuru.
Bayeza bayenyarazo bayathatha imali. Bayabuya kathesi nje so.
Ngoyile kunyaraza. Wonke sekuru.
The Sawira Connect card, connecting you to an easier and more convenient way to receive your funeral grocery allowance. Wipe away delays. Say goodbye to payment interruptions with just one simple swipe, 24/7. The Sawira Connect card, made for your convenience. Anytime, anywhere. Access made easy. For more information, connect with us today.
And we're back. Did you guys have a good break?
I did.
Are you
Relatively, yeah.
Has your mood improved?
I think so. I hope so.
We hope so too. Anyway, so this week we celebrated Heroes Day and Defense Forces Day. they celebrate, like at the stadium and in all these other fora, they spoke about political heroes and so-called national heroes. But I think in our forum, let's talk about economic heroes. The people, and what makes a hero, right? A hero is a person who's stood up to do something greater than himself. He has suffered for it, and in the end he has triumphed, he or she has triumphed, and the world is a better place for that sacrifice. And maybe let's go through a few names and a few groups of people, and let's determine heroes or villains in the economic history of Zimbabwe. And let's begin where it all began. Ian Smith.
No, it didn't begin with Ian Smith. It began with Cecil John Rhodes.
Oh, sorry. Cecil Rhodes.
Or did it?
Well, okay,
Well,
we could go back to
Pre-colonial.
we could go to pre-colonial.
Yeah, who were they?
And-
Yeah, what,
I mean,
the Mutapas?
let's talk about the Mutapas, heroes or villains.
Economically,
Well, I would say that if you look at the Mutapa Empire, which was a big trading empire at the time, and we read about it, they traded gold, ivory, mostly gold and ivory, with Indians
and Arabs.
as well as Europeans. And it
Portuguese
was
in
a
particular.
Portuguese, yeah, and it was a big trading hub. The Mutapa was a big, Great Zimbabwe, where Great Zimbabwe is, was a big trading hub. What I found very curious and very
Are
interesting.
you about to lecture or are you about to answer a question?
I'm saying they were
Heroes.
They were heroes. They were predominantly traders, and they traded gold and ivory, and they built, cattle and agriculture on the back of that. And what I thought I was going to say, what I wanted to say before you came in there, was actually the kingdom tax rate was close to 50%. So whoever was trading,
half went to the state?
half actually went to the state. That is what I found very curious and interesting. Why I'm finding it curious and interesting, especially when you talk about Mutapa, right, is it speaks to an organized state, right, where defense was a big issue. Because they had to defend the gold, they had to defend the ivory, they had to defend
The trading routes.
they had to defend the trading routes.
Well, they had to allow free trade, but protect
The trading routes.
the trading routes.
And it was
And the
a
players.
big issue. It was a
And
big issue.
obviously
and it was-
enforce the collection of the taxes.
What I found very interesting is, and I'm not a historian, so maybe the viewers can weigh in on this. What I found very interesting is it wasn't so much cohesion as it was more voluntary, because whoever was in a gold, was digging up gold, needed to be protected.
Did you say voluntary today?
Yeah.
So how do you think
remember
how do you think this discussion
cohesion.
went when the Mutapa's guys came
So-
and said, so tell us
Well, if you think about it, our private security system is voluntary, right?
yeah, but do you think you could have refused to pay the Mutapa?
So it wasn't voluntary.
Well, you wouldn't be in the trade, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't be in the trade. So
was it
it's sort of
voluntary?
it's similar to what happens in our minds at the moment, right?
They freely pay their royalties.
Well, no, I'm not talking about freely, because now it's a cohesive state. But what I mean is, remember you had options, whether to trade gold, whether to build your cattle head. So if you were a cattle rancher, you were not taxed as much. The people that were taxed were ivory and gold.
How's it different?
Specifically,
How is it different?
ivory and gold.
How is it different from today? Exactly the same. If you do cattle ranching, you don't pay any tax until you sell some hombes. But if you want to go into gold, every gram the state takes some.
Well, I think corporate tax is right across. So if you look at the way the state is instituted or constituted, tax is right across. It's the exemptions that are not across. So you need a presidential SI to exempt one from not paying tax.
Okay,
But I think
we're
that-
going into it.
yeah, let's go back to the Mutapas and say-
Mutapas, for you, the Mutapas are heroes.
They built Great Zimbabwe. and we know a
It's
little
less about building Great Zimbabwe, because you remember Great Zimbabwe is more about it was a citadel and an edifice of just how great they were, but it had no economic or military or significance. It was just really a show of wealth rather than...
No.
So what was...
I'm going to be...
What's critical were the trade routes.
I want to be a devil's advocate regarding Great Zimbabwe in the context of world history, because we're using the word great, and yet perhaps 1,500 years before Great Zimbabwe was built, Rome was built.
I agree with you. That's why I
but talk about our heroes, eh?
No. I think he's making a very important point. Please go ahead. I agree with you.
So when we think about what we want to celebrate, are we not in danger when we elevate them to economic heroes of celebrating mediocrity?
That's why I said their greatness is not in Great Zimbabwe. You made that point, and I say, you know what? Let's be very careful. Their greatness is not in Great Zimbabwe. Their greatness is in the trade routes that they were trading, and they were trading a significant amount of ivory and gold to such an extent that Europeans would write about it, that Europeans would say, or Indians or Arab world would actually significantly, a great chunk of world trade would happen from Great Zimbabwe right through to Zanzibar. So to me, the greatness is not in Great Zimbabwe. But the greatness is in the trade route.
You know why?
And the trade.
Why I wouldn't compare them to Rome or whatever. I would simply say,
why shouldn't we?
No. Okay, my argument. Can I make my argument?
That's his cynicism. And
but playing devil's advocate here.
But my
That's
argument,
not necessarily my view.
But my argument would be, having done that, what did they leave?
Ruins.
But that's an interesting question, and historically, and this is where the occultism or spiritualism or really sometimes destroy us, because
about to go into this.
It's not, because why they left the trade routes was, first, gold became difficult to find in those areas.
Where is the wealth they created? So we can see the wealth that Rome created. We can see the wealth that the Chinese dynasties created. Where is the wealth that the Mutapas and the Roshis created?
By the time Lobengula or Mzilikazi came to these parts of the world, we had the largest herd of cattle in Africa. And part of it was from the earlier days.
Where's the wealth?
Trading.
It's a valid question, and you're not addressing it.
Wait, so you should show me that
question. Similarly, I could say the similar thing about Italy. That, okay, we've heard about great Rome. Where's the wealth? Where's Italy?
We see Rome. We see Vienna. Sorry, not Vienna. What's that town? Venice. We see it. Where is the wealth?
You mean the buildings?
Something that represents the wealth. Where is it?
I'm not so sure I get your question, because
anyway, let's move on.
Yeah,
let's move on.
Are you getting the question? Okay.
Let's move on.
Basically, his question is, what is their legacy beyond the fact that once upon a time there used to be a trading center?
No, let's move on. I think point is made. He's playing dumb. Let's move on to Cicero. Hero or villain?
Definitely a hero. Cecil was definitely a hero, but yeah.
You speak of him as if he was your buddy.
I read about him as if, I would read about, my own father.
Look, I think if you're not going to moralize, and you look at Cecil John Rhodes as an entrepreneur in an era when a lot of things that today are we would consider appalling and morally repugnant, if we were to just set that aside and just judge him by the standard of his day as an entrepreneur, he was a phenomenal entrepreneur.
Even by today's standard.
So I think the reason why I'm dating it by the standard of his day is that today he would be a great villain, because
Why would he be a villain?
because he essentially was an evangelist for imperial colonialism, for racism, and we would rightly villainize him, right? But if we
judge him by the standard,
if we judge him by the standard of his day as an entrepreneur, because there were a lot of people.
Slavery had ended. You know, I think let's judge him because slavery had
By the
ended.
standard of his day.
By then slavery had ended.
yeah, but black people around the world didn't have a vote for another.
Yeah, no,
100
I'm saying
years.
let's judge him because remember this is scales, and we must
So
say
we're judging him as an entrepreneur. We're not
as an
moralizing.
entrepreneur. Yeah, as an entrepreneur, if you're judging him as an entrepreneur,
No, as an
his
entrepreneur, he
negative-
was phenomenal.
Even his negative, I think that his positives outweigh the negatives, and I'm saying that do not give him an easy passage by saying that the era in which he belonged to accepted a number of things that are now repugnant to us. I'm saying judge him correctly, even with today's standards. If we were to be reasonable individuals, yes, there are negative things about him. I don't necessarily think that there is anything wrong with a number of things that he did. I think that there is imperialism, racism, as you said. I think that we should judge him. We should judge him and say that those are the negatives.
Yep.
But then we should also look at the positives and say, well, look at the list of his positives and look at the list of his negatives.
What are his
and
positives?
imbalance.
What are his positives?
So the most significant thing, you talked about the Mutapa Empire and what's their legacy, and part of it is it was not structured in such a way that it could outlive the Mutapa Empire, and that's what Cecil did. He introduced title, for example, in these parts.
Oh, we've outlived title.
Those are the villains. Those are the villains that came after.
He created two countries.
He created two countries.
Well, he was instrumental in South Africa. He was instrumental in both.
No, you mean Zambia. He means
Zambia and
Yeah,
Zimbabwe. They were not. They were not.
They were not there. They were not
states.
nations.
Yes.
Well, in the Western idea of state, they were states, but not in.
No, not as Zambia and Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
not as those
exactly.
two territories.
Exactly.
I would actually.
And he created
I would actually. As a Zimbabwean in the modern era, and as an African as well, I would actually view that as a negative. You know, I and at the risk of, if you guys want to know why, I can explain. But I actually think that is a negative. This idea that he created two nations.
Why would it be a negative?
So I think one of the things that we suffer from as Africans is that we take very seriously these, in fact, too seriously, in my opinion, these borders drawn up in 1884 to our detriment. And so I think that
Cecil didn't create the
Yes.
borders.
Well, he did.
Well, he did. He participated in drawing those borders.
Yes.
No, he didn't.
No, he did. But the point I think you are thinking of, and which I would make, is so think of it not as a drawing of borders, but the unification.
The corporatization.
So we had many tribes and clans that existed as nations. And the creation of Rhodesia, later Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia, and even Nyasaland, basically created a unification that then resulted in these identities, like them or not, that we now have of Shona, Ndebele, Zimbabwean, Zambian, whether Yoemba, whatever.
Can our debate remain economics? Because I think that where we're going,
It's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole, not just a rabbit hole, but we are not experts,
Okay.
right?
You're
So to me, the interesting bit why Cecil would be a hero is he corporatized everything that we did. So whether it was mineral, land, ivory, hunting, or even governance, he introduced governance, well, Western type governance in these parts. National parks, all that corporatization
Railways.
was critical to the success of what we now term Zimbabwe. He created the
If you
bedrock.
think of Zimbabwe as a success.
it was a creative. It was a critical bedrock. of who we are. Okay, quickly. Ian Douglas Smith.
He was an economic villain. He was an absolute failure, in my opinion, from an economic standpoint.
He industrialized this country.
No. So I think that one of the fundamental, and I'm going to upset a lot of people in the manufacturing sector by saying this, but there's this mythology in our country that import substitution is a great thing. It's not. We live in a global village, and you need to drive your competitive advantages. And Zimbabwe was never going to be competitive on the global stage as a manufacturing hub. The fact that he had to spend so much energy and resources in import substitution is actually an indictment of his leadership. I think that, and even if you actually were to walk a mile in his shoes and agree with his constituency that wanted to preserve or lengthen white rule in this part of the world, he was much better off instead of declaring UDI and having to spend all the energy and resources into import substitution, he was much better off actually drawing a roadmap, in which you build institutions that would lead to a smooth transition from white minority rule to
I tend to agree with you.
So he actually took Zimbabwe backwards.
He shouldn't have contested the PS Commission. He should have.
Well, I think that
joined the bandwagon. And
well, I don't want to discuss the politics, but I want to discuss economics. What he did, which was bad for our economy, not just from an import substitution perspective, but fighting an unwinnable war. Like, if you look at what Garfield Todd had done, and you look at the trajectory that Rhodesia at the time was going, it was a bigger economy than Singapore. And Ian Smith takes over in 1964, 64, and then declares UDI in 1965, November 1965. And then we have this an unwinnable, expensive 15-year war. That's his greatest indictment. When we look at the economics...
But what about Kariba? What about the infrastructure?
It wasn't him.
Those things were
Kariba were built by Garfield Todd, actually. Kariba was built... That happened before. So remember what he's saying, and I totally agree with him, that import substitution, never mind that the execution of the policy was great, right? When we look at it in totality, it was a wrong policy. So the same execution, the same verve, the same idea of mobilizing industrialists and saying, let's grow the economy. If the policy was right, then Zimbabwe or Rhodesia at the time would have been a much bigger economy, perhaps twice the size.
Mr. Smith should have just had a chat with Lee Kuan Yew, Mr. Leshenot, or whoever was running Korea at the time.
I would be even more. I would say that Ian Smith should never have been, because we were going backwards, if you think about it.
So we should have just stuck with Todd.
Yeah, with Field. I think at the time, remember what the Rhodesian Front or the Rhodesian government did was they recalled a president, the prime minister at the time, which and that was Westfield, and then they got Ian Smith. So Ian Smith didn't get there through a popular vote. His party actually lost.
Sounds like what's going on in the UK. Okay, so Smith.
So he economically he was a disaster.
Well, not a disaster, but I think overly, yeah, exactly. So we wouldn't call him.
Well, look, if you think about the trajectory we were on under Todd, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you look at how that changed dramatically under Smith, right? He was a disaster.
Okay.
We didn't even have debt. If you look at the debt profile by 1980, it was $700 million US debt, which we should never have had.
Okay, 700 million 1980.
Yeah.
Mugabe.
Oh, that's a disaster. Economics villain. He's like Ian Smith.
But he opened up the economy. We sit here because Mugabe.
Oh, that was actually Garfield Todd. You know, this is the education system changed primarily with Garfield Todd. So we owe a lot of the bedrock, the education bedrock in Zimbabwe to gaffle-toed than we do to
No, but
the later.
But pre-Mugabe, you could have been educated, but you'd have had no economic opportunity.
How many people are employed at the moment? So this is the Ian Smith
the
argument.
census tells us this.
If you hear what Rivara said, and that's a brilliant argument, that he's going to upset a lot of manufacturers, local manufacturers in Zimbabwe. And I think that it's very true of Mugabe, that unfortunately there was a coterie of people who benefited. True, right? Just like the importers and the sanction busting coterie during Ian Smith. But the general population did not benefit. And I think it's similar with Mugabe. The general population economically did not benefit. If you look at our trajectory, oh yeah.
Absolutely, without a shadow of doubt. So if you think about, just apply your mind to the scenario here. We're having Irish whiskey, he's having a latte. How often on a Friday do you think the average Zimbabwean is doing this?
Well, this is a monthly income for a lot of Zimbabweans.
Exactly. And why? Why after 37 years, post-independence, right? So we're just focusing on Mugabe as an economic player.
We're not talking about dead people. We're not talking about people that are alive.
So why?
You can't be a hero if you're alive, I think, in this country.
So why? Like, maybe that's the discussion we should be having, to say, what is the bar that we should use to judge the performance of an economic player, whether it's Ian Smith or Cecil John Rhodes or Robert Mugabe.
You sacrificed. You had an idea, you sacrificed for it, and the world was better.
So from an economic standpoint, between 1980 and November 2017, I'm of the view that there was a lot of economic value destruction. But more people got educated. We all got land. Was this because of or in spite of?
More of us got jobs in the civil service. There's a lot of us around the world because we got educated.
So I don't know whether you remember when we had Simba on and he was describing how, notwithstanding the racism under the Smith regime, they realized that they had to admit black people into the medical school because there just weren't enough white people to enroll as doctors and meet the demand. And so they did the pragmatic thing and they admitted black medical students, right? And well, look, the medical school was small.
It's a simple argument.
But the point is,
with Mugabe, when Mugabe took over, Zimbabwe was bigger than Kenya. Today, Zimbabwe is a fifth.
Is the fifth the size of the Kenyan economy,
and Kenya is not even that great.
Like, they haven't done brilliant things in the last 40 years.
Okay. I can't argue with that. I think that.
So that's the bar.
I think maybe that rounds up the segment, and we shall take a couple of minutes break, and we'll be right back.
At a funeral in the rural areas, there is a lot of work to be done. Fetching water, firewood, stones, bricks, and other things to save for Tonde. Tonde is sitting down where the elders are sitting. The young men are not happy with this because Tonde is the only one who knows everything that needs to be done as the mourners wait for the body of the deceased that is still to come to the rural home. The elders are keeping him close and constantly consulting him.
Listen, guy. You see, among all these old men, nobody knows how your late brother's funeral policy works. Tonde here is a friend who works at Nyarazo. His friend is helping us with all the information, so we need Tonde close to us. You should be thanking Tonde because everything is circuiting nyore.
Nenio Sekun, I just remembered that I have a friend at Nyarazo. Maybe I can help if Tonde can't find his phone.
Introducing Sawi, the chatbot from Nyaradzo. Speak to Sawi for all your queries and inquiries. The benefits of having Sawi by your side are endless. When you need to know about our policy, Nyaradzo products, payment platforms, claims, the Sawira International Plan, where to find the Nyaradzo branches, Nyaradzo contact details, how to apply, and any questions you may have. And she can help you find who you want to speak to. For your convenience, you can ask about anything, from our funeral services, counseling to your payments, and much more. Experience the benefit of having Sawi by your side. App Sawi today on WhatsApp number 0712 992 892. Nyaradzo, Sawira Mukuru, Omgane Omkulu.
Welcome back. As we go down this historical journey and try and decide who's an economic hero, who's a villain. And, as usual, don't take us too seriously. We don't know what we're talking about. What we really want to do is to ignite discussion and debate. So we are looking forward to your responses and reactions on our social media pages. So, I won't say Smith. Rhodes. Oh, sorry, Mutapa, Rhodes, Smith.
Was
Mugabe.
Mzilikazi a hero or a villain?
Tell us. To be honest,
what do you think?
I read, it wasn't called ZimSec then, I read the Ministry of Education syllabus. We weren't told too much about him. Tell us, from
your
research.
would say he was an economic hero because he brought in a superior state to what we already knew in these parts. So we were these tiny little tribes in these parts. And he brought in and he amalgamated these tiny parts, these tiny little tribes into a state, a much bigger state. Obviously, from what he had learned in Zululand with Shaka Zulu.
Look, I don't want to go into a historical argument. I don't think that's factual.
No, it is factual.
I think the Mutapa had done that already.
So if you look at the significance of the Mutapa, if you think about it, yes, they had done that, but we had lost it along the way. And you actually highlighted this. And the immediate pre-colonial time was Lobengula, was Mzilikazi, and Mzilikazi is the one who actually consolidated what we know to be Zimbabwe.
Well, I don't think he consolidated what we know to be Zimbabwe.
Because
I think
when Cecil Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes was
his kingdom was the biggest in this part of the world, and
he
was the natural person to have a discussion with about concessions and that sort of thing. But the borders were drawn not by.
Okay, look, I think we're going to go.
No, when Cecil Rhodes was given a mandate.
No,
whose mandate?
Tinashe, I will quote you and say we're not experts on this, and I think we're going to go into a rabbit hole that will get us into all sorts of trouble. But okay, since we're only talking about dead people, we'll stop at Mugabe. Let's go back a little bit and talk about business people. And as a grouping, the black businessmen pre-independence, particularly 60s and 70s era, the guys who ran butcheries and bottle stores, the guys who ran bus companies in the rural areas in the middle of a war. Heroes, villains?
Heroes. If you think about it, yeah.
I concur with Tinashe.
Yeah, heroes.
But again, I'll ask the question: where's their legacy? And when I go through the names, right? I think of names like Mushandra Pamwe. I think who were the Tawengwas. I think of names like
Kombai.
The Zumbas.
Patrick Kombai.
No, he's an 80s guy.
No, it's actually a 70s. He's a 60s, 70s guy.
Okay.
In fact, his prominence was actually in the 70s.
Okay, we'll put him in there.
Do you know how significant he was? How Patrick Kombai was in the 70s? He funded the Geneva trip. He used to fund a lot of these trips.
Okay, so we'll put him there. We think of them Cheches, and we can name a few more. And the guys in Highfield, Machipisa, people like that. We can do a list. But where's the legacy?
I think what tends to happen is they're not obviously as significant as Cecil Rhodes, but these are our first modern day black entrepreneurs. You don't expect them to be as significant or to have achieved, or the sort of legacy that you're looking for, but they were quite significant because they were trailblazers. So these are the guys who broke the ground, and for that they are heroes.
They made it possible.
They made it possible for the second generation.
But I mean, I struggle with this.
I mean, even Nigel Chanakira talks about his father and his grandfather having been entrepreneurs. So, there's some legacy there. But I think that what limited them is exactly what limits a lot of Zimbabweans today. Because we're all accidents of birth, right? But if you were born in our age group, if we were born in Kenya, we'll be doing significantly a lot more than in Zim. And I think that's the limitation of the great entrepreneurs of the 70s, the black entrepreneurs of the 70s, is that they were limited by Ian Smith's very insular world, which really, and an unnecessary war, which if you didn't have Ian Smith, I think a lot of those entrepreneurs would have done significant things. That's my view.
Also, I think post-independence, the other thing is that we had a worldview in terms of the government that didn't celebrate entrepreneurs or appreciate their contribution to the economy. The idea was everything would be run through social, the control and command from government.
So
in terms of bringing the economy,
independence was bad for these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to be in so much trouble for this show. We're going to get trolled the heck. Okay, all right. I'm going to leave this discussion. Let's move on. 90s.
Why? Let me hear what you think.
No, I mean,
let me hear what you think.
We've made the point and we're going to get into trouble. It's okay. I embrace it. You guys are my friends.
Do you appreciate what Rufaro is saying?
Yes.
This is a significant point that Rufaro. Would you like to make that point again?
No, I think the point has been made quite loudly. Let's move on to the 90s. So then you've got a new breed of entrepreneurs who then rises in the 90s. Mugabe is pushing indigenization. You've got SAP and economic.
It's not Mugabe, but it's Chidzero, it's Ariston Chambati. It's,
okay, the government is pushing indigenization. The government is pushing indigenization. Indigenization one. And then you've got a liberalization of the economy that's happening. And then you've got this new generation of entrepreneurs. Some who are entrepreneurs because they've been retrenched. You've got some that become entrepreneurs for whatever other reasons, but many of them are extremely colorful. The names that come to mind are Roger Boka, Peter Pamile, Chambati. I'm trying to avoid people that are alive, but some of them are still alive today.
Yeah. I think what's significant was actually the liberalization of the financial services sector. Because remember, a lot of the entrepreneurs, why they didn't grow is because they couldn't get funding, whether debt or equity. So once you liberalize the financial services sector and you had a lot of bankers, black bankers, come into the fore, is they started lending because they understood black businesses and they started lending to black businesses, and that's why that class, that particular entrepreneurial class, actually started.
No, but some of them predate.
But they became significant. They became significant in the 90s and less in the 80s.
No, but black banks really. I mean, you've got United Merchant Bank coming in the middle of the 90s, but by then you had.
No, it was before that because NMB was founded in 1992. So
you had Intermarket.
So there were a few before that.
But you already by then had, I'm trying to avoid names, but let's talk about the Indigenous Business Development Corporation. The IBDC was already there by then. And that gave birth to a lot of entrepreneurs that some of whom are still famous to this day. So it was a movement.
Well, so somebody explained it this way to me, that the difference between the 80s business and the 90s business was what happened in the 90s were the educated folk. So the 80s businesses, or the tail end of the 70s to the 80s, were people who were business people, were pushed into business and were not necessarily, professional. Whereas the 90s, these were professional individuals who were now going into.
So you had your engineers, your bankers, people
exactly with a profession, and not necessarily grew up in business. So that's the significant thing between the 80s and the 90s.
Okay, so heroes, villains.
Oh, heroes, by any stretch of the imagination.
Again, where's their legacy?
It was destroyed.
The economy. Yeah.
Between 1998 and 2008, I think that we had such epically negative economic policy. It's amazing that there were successful entrepreneurs who survived that and are still active today. Because the value, the contraction in GDP between 1998 and 2008 is remarkable for a country not at war. We lost 40% of our GDP in real terms.
Absolutely.
It's mind-boggling.
You know, when you look at the Gilded Age, the American Gilded Age, there is something phenomenal about how the right economic policy, which are set by the politicians, then give rise to all these entrepreneurs. And if you think about it, a lot of these entrepreneurs had migrated from Europe, right? And because of the constricted economic or political environment in Europe, could not develop. And yet in America, given the space, the political space, they became the greats. And I think that Zimbabwe unfortunately suffered the opposite.
Well, it suffered what Europe was suffering.
Yes, exactly.
These guys went to America, became billionaires. They went to South Africa and did really well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that takes us to the 90s, early 2000s. The bankers. I think you touched on it.
Yeah, I think
heroes, villains.
Heroes. There was only one villain during that period, but we shall not. We said we'll deal with
the living, the dead.
Yeah.
Okay. After this, you must tell me who the villain is. But
you don't know?
Yeah, it's obvious. No prizes for
no,
guessing.
He wasn't a real banker. If you're talking about who, I think you're talking.
And we're not talking about this person. We're not talking about. But I think, yeah.
Heroes or villains? Again, where's the legacy?
Look, I think that it's unfortunate we're in a place where we have so much disruption and distortion from a policy standpoint that it's hard to actually create a legacy in this part of the world, sadly. So I'm not going to be harsh in my judgment of the entrepreneurs who are very successful and prominent post 2000, because it's an extremely difficult environment.
Okay, so now we look across this.
And maybe their legacy is what they did, right? That in itself is a legacy.
That they were able to achieve that level of success in this difficult environment.
Start a bank. Do you know that in South Africa, I think only Mutapa is trying to start a bank, right? Like a black-owned bank. In Zimbabwe, we had what, over 12?
Yeah, I think we had 12, 13, 14 at some stage.
Banks, like, individuals could just come together and start a bank. That's still very difficult in South Africa. I don't understand why. That's still very difficult in Botswana, Namibia, all right? You see that in Kenya, in Mozambique. You've been in Mozambique.
No, they've had indigenous banks.
Indigenous banks, okay.
But they've gone the same way as ours.
What's interesting is that Nigeria went through the same cycle, but they were protected by policy and the governor at that time, where they were able to recapitalize themselves again. And this is what's critical, is that unless your financial services sector is run by entrepreneurs, so that's the other thing I have a problem with. This idea, the new rules, that an entrepreneur cannot have, one individual cannot have more than 10% of a bank. Actually, you need individuals. If you look at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, all those partnerships or individually driven banks, you need that because they're the only ones who can understand entrepreneurs. If you look at funding agriculture, for example, if you look at policy, people who can push policy hard, and as important as it is, it can only happen when you have entrepreneur run banks, not when you have manager run banks. They don't understand the entrepreneur. And this is the problem that the 80s entrepreneurs had.
You're going to upset bankers, but carry on.
No, okay. But interesting. And it leads into two very important questions, right? So, and let's do the first one first. Where are you in creating economic heroes without political policy and political will? Is it possible? I mean, he's
the wrong person to ask this question.
No, but he's talking about influencing policy.
Yeah, I think that, to swim against the tide is just a very difficult thing to do. That's why we recognize that these guys are actually swimming against the tide. And this is the thing that government has to understand, that it's the tide.
And they set the tide.
And they set the tide. And that's all they need to do. It's quite fascinating how you have entrepreneurs in government. Entrepreneurs should never be in government, because when they come up with these weird and sophisticated ideas and complex, and where they want to run things, I mean, you have Bakosi, for example, gold, you have all these very entrepreneurial ideas where they're trying out their luck in policy making. Should never happen. In fact, you need a conservative policy maker.
This is another show. Second part of my question. Average Zimbabwean, who in all of this over the last 120, 130 years.
It's a lot of average Zimbabweans.
Has consumed, has educated their children, has kept the economy ticking, has gone to work. Is he not the hero?
No. No, sadly. That's a very populist view. I think that leadership matters. I think that leadership moves the needle. I think if you look at anywhere in the world, I think you've got there's a quote from, I forget the name, about who actually moves the needle in history. And it's not
Roosevelt.
the masses.
Roosevelt.
It's just
it's the man in the arena.
No, it's not the man in the arena. It's just a handful of unreasonable, very committed individuals who actually change history. It's not the masses. The masses are either benefactors of great leadership, beneficiaries, or victims of appalling leadership. But they're not going to, by themselves, emancipate them. Right?
But they keep the system turning.
They don't.
They don't. I agree with
look, I disagree with these guys. I
agree with you.
I think the common man in this country who has woken up and continued to grind every day for the last 130 years, despite the chaos and the inconsistency that this country has rained down upon them, deserves a medal.
For what?
For doing just that. And not getting on a plane, not skipping the border.
Do you believe in participation medals?
Yes.
Okay.
It's been great having you along. As you can see, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. You really shouldn't take them seriously. But, we hope that we're inspiring thoughts. We hope that we're inspiring discussions. And we know we've been a bit controversial today. We would love to hear back from you, because I think this is the stuff that nations are made of. Honest discussions, robust discussions. Let's exchange ideas.
Alcohol-induced discussions.
no more whiskey for you. Let's exchange ideas on what makes for a greater Zimbabwe, and what takes us to that next level. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.